This is where generational trauma plays a role because no one taught our parents what to do with their feelings, so they don't know and usually respond inappropriately or in a way that is hurtful. And then when we're having our feelings, they're way too overwhelmed to deal with them. Welcome to Therapy Explained, where we explain, demystify, and destigmatize mental health and mental health treatment. My name is Deniss. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and your very own mental health cheerleader. Today we're going to be talking about what happens to us when we grow up with parents who are dismissive. Being first and second generation means that we have been gifted with so many wonderful things about our cultures. Being a BIPOC adult means that we also are a part of a collective culture, music, food, knowledge, and wisdom that's been passed down from generations. I have a whole video on strengths and resiliencies of being a BIPOC adult, but being part of collective cultures and being first and second generation also means that we have inherited some unhealthy or toxic patterns. So to help you in your journey of breaking toxic and unhealthy patterns, today we're going to be talking about one of these, which is growing up in a dismissive home, which results in becoming dismissive of ourselves. What does that look like? What does that actually mean for us as grown-ups when we're trying to change some of these patterns? Before we jump into the list though, remember to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already for all videos mental health. And if you're not already following me on Instagram, make sure that you do because I post a lot of mental health information and resources there, as well as our cheat sheet for today's video. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump to it. Difficulty speaking up for yourself. If you find that you're having a hard time speaking up for yourself, it's usually because at home growing up, you had negative experiences of speaking up for yourself. Whether that was verbal or physical punishment for saying something, even sometimes yes, which we know being Latinx, saying yes or having an opinion counts as talking back. So if we grew up in a home where that was punished, where even saying anything can be seen as talking back, we are going to internalize that, learn that, and growing up, we're going to have a really hard time voicing our opinions. Not because we think that our boss or friends or people around us are going to necessarily be hurtful to us, but because that's what our brain has learned it tends to happen. Voicing our opinions doesn't work out for us, it doesn't feel good. Difficulty trusting your choices. Having a hard time making choices and then trusting that you've made the right one usually comes from growing up in a dismissive home with dismissive parents. Now, this is because you most likely haven't been given the opportunity to make choices to begin with, so you're not used to that. You haven't learned how to trust your gut and what that feels like, to really listen to what your body is telling you. So all of this is new and will most likely be difficult for you when you're first starting out trying to listen to that part of you. But again, if you grew up in a home with dismissive parents, then any choice that you make probably was criticized and looked down on and probably catastrophized. Like, this is gonna go wrong, this is a horrible choice, and this is just generally bad. So you're already taught not to trust yourself, and learning to undo that does take time, but it is possible. Difficulty knowing what you feel. If you grew up in a dismissive home where parents are like, oh, don't worry about it, it's fine, it's nothing, you're going to start questioning your own emotions. If something has hurt your feelings, if something feels scary and your parents are constantly saying that you're being dramatic or that you're being sensitive, you're already going to start to question your feelings. Now, if that happens over time, which it generally does when we grow up in a home with dismissive parents, then that becomes internalized and we end up saying the same things to ourselves. We end up doubting whether or not this is real. Am I being dramatic? Am I being too sensitive? Difficulty knowing what to do with your feelings. And part of the journey, of the healing journey, is learning what to do with it. If you grew up in a dismissive home, if your parents are telling you that you're being crazy or that you're being too sensitive or too dramatic, then that means that they probably aren't teaching you what to do with that feeling because it's not a real feeling, right? And most likely they don't know what to do with their feelings either. This is where generational trauma plays a role because no one taught our parents what to do with their feelings, so they don't know and usually respond inappropriately or in a way that is hurtful. And then when we're having our feelings, they are way too overwhelmed to deal with them. It is way too much for them to manage their own, that they don't know what to do with yours. They certainly want you to put them away. So then you're never taught what to do with yours, and hence we have generational trauma. A negative internal dialogue. So you'll most likely have an internal dialogue that is pretty hurtful or critical or judgmental if you grew up in a home with parents who were dismissive, because as you've heard me say probably more than once, we internalize this. We internalize messages when we grow up because our parents are the ones that are teaching us what to expect of the world, what to expect of ourselves, and how we're supposed to be talking to ourselves. So if our emotions are constantly seen as just too dramatic or way too much or not even real, we're going to internalize that. If we are being told that our opinions don't matter, or that when we voice our opinions, that's a bad thing and we end up feeling hurt or judged in some way, then again, we're going to internalize that. And that is the message that we will then reinforce as we grow up. So you'll probably notice now as a grown-up that you are not being very kind to yourself. And that is usually step one. It's noticing that internal dialogue and trying to change it. If you are struggling with a lot of these, it's important for us to understand where they're coming from. So if we're able to understand, okay, this comes from growing up in a dismissive home, growing up in a place where my feelings and emotions and opinions were not prioritized and sometimes even punished. The reason we want to be able to understand that is because that allows us to start to come up with coping tools and mechanisms that we can use to address that directly and change these patterns. Now, this isn't necessarily about blaming our parents and saying that everything is their fault. Remember that we have to contextualize ourselves and our parents. A lot of this comes from generational trauma, that our parents are most likely, or grandparents most likely, operating from a place of survival. Your feelings weren't important because most likely your parents or their parents were in survival mode. The only thing that mattered was making sure that there was a roof over your head and food on the table, and that was it. Who cares if you felt sad or tired or scared? That didn't matter. So your parents or grandparents internalize that message, right? It doesn't matter. My feelings are not important in this moment. I just need to meet the basic needs of my children and myself and my family, and that is it. Now, that helps us get pretty far as a generation. We are here now today because of that, but now we don't need that. Now we have the capacity to thrive and not just survive. This channel is all about learning how to be more active in our mental health and learning how to be more self-accountable and self-compassionate. So if you're curious about, okay, what do I do now that I understand this, go ahead and check out all my other videos on how to challenge negative thoughts, how to manage your anxiety, how to learn how to trust yourself and build self-esteem. I have so many videos on this, so feel free to check that out. Remember to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already so that you don't miss any videos moving forward. Follow me on Instagram because your cheat sheet is already available to you there. And before you leave, give this video some love in any way that feels authentic to you. And of course, as always, I'm cheering for you and so very thankful that you are here today.